The crystalline spires of Ilisara pierced the eternal twilight sky, their translucent facades reflecting the perpetual aurora that draped the frozen wasteland. At the highest point of the central tower, Emperor Orion stood motionless, his ageless eyes fixed upon the artificial sunset he had commanded into existence. 1,000 years of absolute rule had not diminished his appreciation for beauty, though it had long since numbed his capacity to feel anything resembling true emotion. The hovering palace of Ilisara, suspended by ancient arcane technologies between the ice desert below and the manufactured heavens above, was his masterpiece, a testament to power that had transcended mortality itself. The air around him hummed with dark energies, the source of his immortality and the foundation of his unquestioned reign. "Your Eternal Majesty," came the reverent voice of Sir Kael, commander of the Crystal Archers, and perhaps the closest thing to a friend that Orion had permitted himself in centuries. "The sunset ritual guests await your presence in the Horizon Chamber." Orion didn't turn, his silver-white hair, floating as if underwater despite the still air, framed features too perfect to be entirely human. "How many times have we performed this ceremony, Kael?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. 999. Your eternity. Tonight marks 1,000 years since your ascension. Orion finally turned, his movements fluid and graceful. 1,000 artificial sunsets to replace the one I sacrificed for immortality. Tell me, is that a fair exchange? Sir Kael lowered his gaze. It is not my place to question the divine bargains of an eternal emperor. Of course not, Orion replied, the faintest trace of bitterness coloring his otherwise emotionless tone. Assemble the Ethics Council. I shall join the celebration shortly. The Horizon Chamber blazed with spectral light. Nobles and high mages of Ilisara, many having extended their own lives through lesser magics, gathered in their finest attire. The 7 members of the Ethics Council stood apart, their ancient faces betraying nothing as they observed the proceedings with calculating eyes. Orion entered without announcement. None was needed. The crowd parted before him, heads bowing in synchronized reverence. He acknowledged none of them as he ascended the obsidian dais. With a gesture, he activated the Twilight Engine, the masterpiece of arcane technology that sustained his artificial heavens. As the massive crystalline gears began to turn, projecting the illusion of a setting sun across the chamber's transparent dome, Orion scanned the assembly with disinterest. Then, unexpectedly, his gaze caught on someone who did not bow. Near the chamber's edge stood a woman in simple traveler's robes, her auburn hair catching the artificial sunlight like living flame. While others stared at the spectacle above, she was looking directly at him, her expression neither reverent nor fearful, but curious. When their eyes met, Orion felt something he had not experienced in a millennium. Surprise. "Who is the uninvited guest?" he asked, his voice carrying effortlessly over the murmuring crowd. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the woman, who straightened rather than cowered. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice clear and unafraid. "A wandering sorceress seeking knowledge. I heard tales of Emperor Orion's legendary sunset ritual and sought to witness it myself." One of the Ethics Council members stepped forward, his ancient face tightening with disapproval. "Forgive this intrusion, Eternal One. We shall have this trespasser removed immediately." "No," Orion said, surprising himself as much as his courtiers. "Let her stay. It has been some time since we welcomed new perspectives to our celebrations." The ritual proceeded as it had 999 times before, the artificial sun setting over an artificial horizon, bathing the chamber in gold and crimson light. But for Orion, something was different. Throughout the ceremony, he found his attention repeatedly drawn to the wandering sorceress, to Lyra, whose eyes reflected the sunset with genuine wonder rather than practiced adoration. When the ritual concluded and the guests began to disperse, Orion found himself descending from the dais, an unprecedented action that sent whispers rippling through the chamber. "You did not bow," he said as he approached Lyra. I was too captivated by the beauty of your creation to remember protocol, she replied, meeting his gaze without hesitation. Though I wonder why an immortal emperor, who has outlived the natural sun's cycle, creates such perfect imitations of what was lost. The directness of her question, the implication that something had been lost, should have angered him. Instead, Orion felt a flicker of something almost forgotten: interest. Walk with me, he commanded, though his tone lacked its usual imperial edge. As they left the horizon chamber, Sir Kale fell into step behind them, his hand resting on his crystal sword. Arion dismissed him with a gesture. I will be safe with our guest, he said. Return to your duties. Kale hesitated, his loyalty warring with concern. The Ethics Council will not approve of you being alone with an unknown sorceress. Your eternity. The Ethics Council does not rule me, Orion replied coldly. I rule them. Reluctantly, Kale bowed and withdrew, though Orion noted the worry in his old friend's eyes. The crystal gardens stretched beneath the eternal aurora, ice flowers blooming in impossible configurations. Orion guided Lyra through paths he had walked alone for centuries, watching as she touched the frozen roses with evident delight. You asked why I recreate what was lost, he said finally. Perhaps because even immortality cannot restore what was sacrificed to achieve it. And what was that? Lyra asked, her voice soft. The ability to truly experience time, Orion answered, surprising himself with his candor. When one lives forever, moments lose their value. I create these sunsets hoping to recapture the significance they once held, when my days were numbered. Lyra studied him thoughtfully. Then your power has become your prison. No one had spoken to Orion with such boldness in centuries. He should have been offended, should have reminded this wanderer of her place. Instead, he found himself continuing their conversation long into the night, as the aurora shifted overhead and the ice gardens chimed softly in the wind. In the following days, witch hunters appeared in the outer districts of Elisara. Normally, Orion paid little attention to the mundane workings of his empire. The hunting of unregistered magic users was standard practice, overseen by the Ethics Council to maintain order. But when he learned the hunters sought a wandering sorceress with flame-colored hair, he felt an unfamiliar urgency. Using powers he had not exercised in centuries, Orion located Lyra in the lower city, moments before the hunters closed in. He appeared before her in a shower of dark energy, startling both Lyra and her pursuers. This woman is under Imperial protection, he declared, his voice echoing with power that made the witch hunters fall to their knees. Return to the Ethics Council and inform them of my displeasure. When they were alone, Lyra looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Why would the Emperor of Elisara protect a simple wandering sorceress? Orion considered the question. For a millennium, his actions had been calculated, dispassionate. This impulsive protection was unprecedented. Perhaps, he said slowly, after 1,000 years of predictability, I find myself curious about the unpredictable. From that day forward, Orion found reasons to seek out Lyra's company. He showed her the hidden wonders of his crystal palace, the library of forgotten languages, the observatory of distant realms, the chamber of eternal ice. In return, she shared stories of her travels through lands he had ruled but never truly seen. Your magic, he observed one evening as they stood in his private observatory, watching distant stars through enchanted crystal. It's different from any I've encountered. It lacks the rigidity of our imperial techniques. Lyra smiled, extending her hand. A small flame appeared above her palm. But unlike the controlled fires of Elisara's mages, this one danced and swirled with a life of its own. Magic needn't be just a tool for power, she explained. It can be an expression of life itself. Life, Orion echoed, the word feeling strange on his lips. I've preserved mine endlessly, yet sometimes I wonder if I remember what it means to truly live. As he spoke, he extended his own hand toward hers, his dark energy, usually crackling with imperial authority, gentled as it approached her flame. When the two magics touched, Neither extinguished the other. Instead, they danced together, light and shadow intertwining. Orion stared at the phenomenon, transfixed. This shouldn't be possible. Perhaps, Lyra suggested gently. There are many things possible that your ethics council hasn't permitted you to discover. Their meetings did not go unnoticed. The ethics council, those ancient mages who had guided the Empire's moral and magical boundaries for centuries, observed with growing concern. In their hidden chamber beneath the palace, they convened an emergency session. The Emperor grows dangerously attached to this wanderer, said Councillor Vex, the eldest among them. His interest in her threatens the stability of our eternal reign. She must be eliminated, suggested another. For the good of Elisara. No, Vex cautioned. Direct action against her would risk the Emperor's wrath. We must instead remind him of his greater purpose and the sacrifices required to maintain it. Sir Kale, standing guard outside the council chamber, overheard their deliberations. His loyalty to Orion spanned centuries, but so too did his belief in the Empire's sacred order. For the first time in his long service, he found himself torn between duty to his emperor and duty to the Empire itself. That night, he sought out Orion in the Crystal Gardens, where the immortal ruler had taken to walking alone, lost in thoughts that had never troubled him before meeting Lyra. Your eternity, Kale began carefully. I speak now not as your commander, but as one who has served you faithfully through the ages. Orion regarded him with newfound awareness. You're concerned about my interest in Lyra. The Ethics Council believes she weakens you. Kale confirmed. And I have never seen you so distracted from your imperial duties. Distracted? Orion's laugh held no humor. Or awakened. For a millennium, I have ruled without questioning the nature of my rule. She makes me remember what it was to be human. But you chose to transcend humanity, Kale reminded him. For the good of Elisara, Orion turned his gaze to the artificial heavens above. Did I choose? Or was I guided to a choice by those who benefited from my eternal rule? The 1,000-year ceremony approached, the ritual that would renew Orion's immortality and the Empire's dark covenant. Traditionally, it required the Emperor to reaffirm his commitment to eternal rule by sacrificing something of value. In the past, these sacrifices had been symbolic, for Orion had long since abandoned all attachments. This time, however, the Ethics Council saw an opportunity. In their chamber, they prepared a binding spell unlike any they had cast before. The wandering sorceress will be our instrument, Vex declared to his fellow counselors. Through her, we will secure another millennium of stability. On the eve of the ceremony, Lyra came to Orion in his private chambers, an unprecedented breach of protocol that the guards permitted only on the Emperor's explicit orders. You should leave Elisara, Orion told her without preamble. Tomorrow's ritual. I sense the council has plans that may put you in danger. Lyra approached him without fear, placing her hand on his. The simple touch sent a current through him more powerful than any magic. I've seen how you look at the artificial sunset, she said softly. With longing for something real, I can show you a true sunset. Orion, not a perfect illusion, but a genuine ending that makes the moment precious. I cannot leave, he replied, though for the first time in a millennium, he found himself wishing otherwise. My immortality is bound to Elisara. To leave would be to die. Is existing forever the same as living? She asked. Before he could answer, the chamber doors burst open. The Ethics Council entered, accompanied by crystal guards. Forgive the intrusion, Eternal Emperor, Vex said, his ancient face revealing nothing. But we must secure the Wanderer for tomorrow's ceremony. Orion rose to his full height, dark energy crackling around him. Explain yourselves. The Millennium Ritual requires a significant sacrifice. Vex continued smoothly. What better demonstration of your commitment to eternal rule than to sacrifice this distraction? The woman who has made even an immortal emperor question his purpose? You overstep, counsel, Orion warned, his voice deadly quiet. Do we? Vex challenged. Or do we merely remind you of the bargain you made? Immortality requires the surrender of mortal attachments. You knew this when you accepted eternal life. The crystal guards moved toward Lyra. Without thinking, Orion extended his hand, sending them flying backward with a surge of dark power. Leave us, he commanded the council. The ritual will proceed tomorrow as planned, but I will determine the nature of the sacrifice. After a tense moment, the counselors withdrew, their ancient eyes calculating. When they were gone, Lyra turned to Orion. What will you do? She asked. Orion looked at her, seeing not just the woman before him, but a possibility he had thought forever closed. A life with meaning beyond power, with feelings beyond cold calculation. Something no one expects, he answered. The Millennium Chamber dwarfed even the grandest halls of Elisera. Built at the exact center of the floating palace, its transparent dome opened directly to the manufactured heavens above. For the first time in 1,000 years, the chamber had been activated for its true purpose, not merely to display an artificial sunset, but to renew the dark covenant that sustained Orion's immortality and Elisara's impossible existence. The Ethics Council stood in a semicircle around the central altar, a massive crystal that pulsed with the combined dark energy of 1,000 years. The nobles and mages of Elisara filled the chamber, their faces solemn with anticipation. And in a crystal cage suspended above the altar hung Lyra, her powers neutralized, her eyes never leaving Orion's face. Citizens of eternal Elisara, Vex intoned, his voice magnified to fill the chamber. 1,000 years ago, our emperor transcended mortality to lead us into an age of stability and power. Today, he renews that sacred covenant. Orion ascended the steps to the altar, his imperial robes flowing around him, his face an unreadable mask. Above, Lyra watched him, her expression not of fear but of sad understanding. The ritual requires sacrifice, Vex continued. A demonstration that our emperor remains untethered from mortal weakness, dedicated solely to eternal rule. The crystal cage began to lower toward the altar. Orion raised his hand, and the cage stopped. You speak of sacrifice, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. But not of choice. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. The Ethics Council exchanged glances. 1,000 years ago, Orion continued. I chose immortality because I feared death, feared the loss of my power, my knowledge, my very self. I sacrificed the experience of true living for endless existence. He turned to face his subjects, and for the first time in centuries, real emotion showed on his perfect features. I have ruled Elisara for a millennium, watching generations live and die while I remained unchanged. I have presided over artificial sunsets because I surrendered my right to experience real ones. Today, I make a different choice. With a gesture, he shattered Lyra's cage. She floated gently to the ground beside him, free but choosing to stay. Your eternity, Vex protested, genuine alarm breaking through his ancient composure. You cannot break the covenant. The consequences. I am well aware of the consequences. Orion interrupted. Elisara exists in this impossible state, suspended between earth and sky, because of my immortal power. Without it, the palace will fall. The empire as we know it will end. Horror spread through the chamber as his words registered. You would doom us all for this mortal distraction, Vex demanded. Orion looked at Lyra, then back to the Ethics Council. No. I would offer you a choice, the same choice I never truly had. Stay and rule a new Elisara, one built on solid ground rather than suspended in endless twilight. Or cling to this beautiful illusion and fall with it. Before the council could respond, Orion turned to the central crystal. Placing his hands upon its surface, he began to speak words in a language older than Elisara itself, the language of the original covenant. What is he doing? Someone cried from the crowd. He's breaking the seal, Vex answered, his voice hollow with disbelief. He's surrendering immortality. Dark energy surged from the crystal, enveloping Arian in a storm of arcane power. The palace trembled, crystal spires chiming discordantly as the magic that had sustained them for a millennium began to unravel. "Arian!" Lyra called out, reaching for him through the maelstrom. Their hands met amid the chaos. As their fingers intertwined, Lyra's magic, warm, living, and real, flowed into Arian, not fighting against the dark energy but transforming it. The storm around them changed, darkness giving way to a soft golden light. Above the palace, through the transparent dome, the artificial heavens flickered. For a brief, breathtaking moment, the manufactured twilight parted, revealing the true sky beyond, and with it, a genuine sunset, the first to touch Elisara in 1,000 years. Orion stared upward, transfixed by the simple, imperfect beauty of it. "So, this is what I sacrificed," he whispered. The Ethics Council fled as the palace lurched downward, the magic sustaining its elevation failing rapidly. Throughout Elisara, panicked nobles and mages rushed toward escape portals, abandoning the sinking crystal city. In the chaos, Sir Kale fought his way to Orion's side. "Your eternity," he shouted over the din of shattering crystal. "We must get you to safety." Orion looked at his oldest companion, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. "I am no longer eternal, old friend, and I have never been safer than I am now." He gestured toward Lyra, whose magic now formed a protective bubble around them as the palace began to break apart. "Go, Kyle. Lead our people to the ground. Build something new, something real." After a moment of hesitation, Kale nodded. "It has been an honor to serve you," he said, before turning to organize the evacuation of those still trapped in the collapsing structure. As Elisara fell from the sky, breaking into 1,000 glittering shards, Orion and Lyra stood within her protective magic, watching the true sunset paint the horizon with colors no artificial display could ever capture. "Was it worth it?" Lyra asked softly. 1,000 years of rule for one real sunset? Orion felt the unfamiliar sensation of a mortal heart beating in his chest, felt the precious limitation of a life that would now, eventually, end. "This is not the end," he replied, taking her hand. "For the first time in a millennium, it's a beginning." The crystal palace of Elisara crashed into the ice desert below, its impossible architecture collapsing in a spectacular display of light and sound. But at its center, protected by Lyra's magic, Orion and she remained unharmed, no longer emperor and sorceress, but simply two people facing an uncertain future together. They walked away from the ruins hand in hand, leaving behind the remnants of an eternal empire for the promise of finite days filled with genuine experience. Behind them, the sun completed its descent below the horizon, a true ending that held the promise of a new dawn. In the years that followed, the story of Orion and Lyra became legend. Some said they settled in a small coastal village, where they watched the sunset together each evening. Others claimed they traveled the world, Orion experiencing with mortal eyes the empire he had ruled but never truly seen. The ruins of Elisara became a place of pilgrimage, a monument to the immortal emperor who chose mortality for love. Sir Kale, true to his final promise, led the survivors to establish a new kingdom on solid ground, one where the Ethics Council's influence was diminished, and natural magic like Lyra's was studied rather than feared. As for Orion and Lyra, they treasured each day together, knowing that their time, like the sunsets they never missed, was fleeting and therefore precious. And when asked if he regretted his choice, Orion would always smile and say that a single moment of genuine feeling was worth more than an eternity of hollow power. For in the end, he had discovered what his 1,000-year reign had never taught him, that life's value lies not in its duration, but in the love that fills its passing moments.